today's session. Our goal today is to explore ways to engage students in collaborative learning. We'll look at a few examples in our session today, and then we're going to talk about how you can enhance your existing lessons by creating student-led activities. And then finally, we are going to talk about how you can connect your students to a live session and how you can also share out the learning with students outside of the classroom. So this doesn't necessarily need to be an activity that is teacher-led in the classroom. These can be activities you can share out with students to continue on learning outside of the session. All right, so let's continue on. Our first activity that we will do together, we will engage in a quick whole class whiteboard. So right now this page is view only. What I'm going to do here in a moment is turn this into a whole class whiteboard so you all can contribute to the activity. So I am going to go ahead and click up here on this little person. And I'm going to turn this into a whole class whiteboard. And what I'm going to ask my class to do is to brainstorm. What do you know about digital citizenship? Now you have a few tools on the side, but I will just pop up the directions on how to get connected to this activity just one more time here on my screen. If you'd like to connect to the live activity, you can go to hellosmart.com and you can join as a guest for today. And my class ID is 1270. Once you're in and connected, you'll get a few tools. You can use the text tool to brainstorm what are some words that you associate with digital citizenship. Or you are welcome to pop in and maybe you want to add an image that connects with the topic of digital citizenship. You can also add things like shapes and lines so that you can create a visual. So maybe I'm thinking for digital citizenship, that makes me think of online safety. So I'm just going to pop one of these keywords in here so we can start brainstorming on this kind of virtual graffiti wall that we have for students. Right now we're meeting virtually and we're connecting to this activity, but I could use this in the classroom where students can connect their Chromebooks to the activity. I could have this on my smart board or my interactive display so that students could even come up to the board to add things like images and text to start creating those visuals on this topic, digital citizenship. Or I could just have students connect from their devices. I don't even necessarily need to use the public display. All right, great. So we've got some ideas coming in. I'm going to go over here to this picture gallery. Again, I have shapes and lines, but maybe I'm also going to find images. So maybe I'm thinking about, how are we going to use the computer? Oh, I guess it's a little bit an outdated picture there. All right, so I'm just going to add that image to the screen. So again, giving students that opportunity to demonstrate what they know, whether it is using text to demonstrate what they know, or whether they are using images to connect with the topic digital citizenship. All right, great. So I have a peek here on the chat. If anyone has any questions about this activity, you're welcome to add some questions into the chat. And if not, we will continue on to our next example. All right. So the next activity that we will engage in is a quick sorting activity. So this is one of the game-based activities that you can build in Lumio. And what we right now have that opportunity is to model this activity for students. So again, we're connected using our devices. So students in the classroom can be connected with their Chromebook so they can independently participate in this activity. This is another really great activity to have students maybe working with a partner or in a small group to be talking about what are some of the positive online behaviors versus negative online behaviors, and to start fostering some of that conversation with students. As you're participating in the activity, I am collecting that data and information. So I'll show you that teacher view here in just a moment in my shared screen. But again, this activity, we're going to be able to have students use their devices, or I could be using something like a smartboard or an interactive display in the classroom, where as a whole group, we could start talking about, okay, what are some of these examples of either positive or negative online behaviors? So for example, maybe I keep my name and address private. Would that be a positive or a negative behavior? I'll sort. Great, it's a positive behavior. So this is a good example of something we would want to encourage. Maybe I only say positive things online. Is that positive? Great. I would stay online all day if I could. Is that positive? Nope. Gonna kick it right out of there, and it's going to say that's a negative online behavior. So again, giving students the opportunity to maybe we could work as a whole group, or maybe we've split into smaller groups to start talking through some of these choices and behaviors that we might engage in online. Now, this is that opportunity to model the activity or work through it as a whole class, but I'm going to click over to where it says view progress. And now what I'm going to be able to do is just have this quick check on how students are engaging in the activity. So I can see my overall student progress, who's completed the activity, how many students have completed the activity. This will allow me to toggle on and see more information. And at the moment, it is keeping that information hidden. Obviously, if I'm sharing the screen in the classroom up on my smartboard or interactive display, I may want to hide that information as before, publicly showing that. For the purposes of our activity today, I will go ahead and toggle on to show the live results. I can see the average score. I can see how much time students are taking on this sorting activity. And then I can also see the frequent incorrect or correct answers. So this is going to give me just that quick check on how students are engaging, their understanding of this topic. Again, this is how I'm going to then pivot and continue on my lesson. Maybe I need to take a pause and do a quick review before we go on to the next activity. Or from what I can see here, we're doing well, we're understanding this topic. Oh, I see there's maybe one or two that are coming up as frequently incorrect. So, okay, great. Maybe let's talk through those behaviors before we go on to our next activity. So it's just going to give me that chance to check in on students' progress. And then I can even take this a step further. And I can see individual student progress. So I will click there. Again, it's going to hide that information if I am publicly showing this page in the classroom. But for the purpose of our activity, I'll go ahead and show the progress. And I can see how the students have completed the activity, who has completed the activity. If we pop in, we can see great how much time it took for someone to complete the activity and then their overall score, which again, maybe I need to pull a small group of students and revisit the topic before we go on to completing a more collaborative activity that we'll complete. So again, this was that super sort activity. You were able to connect. I'm able to do a quick check on students' understanding using the sorting game, and students are able to get that feedback in real time as well. We can pause, ask for questions, have some discussion, and then we're going to roll this into a more small group activity. All right, so welcome. If you have just joined us, I will pop into the chat the information on how to get connected to my live Lumio lesson right now. You can go to hellosmart.com, join as a guest, and my class ID is 12770. So what we're going to complete next is we're going to hop into something called a small group workspace. So this page, it started its life as a graphic organizer. It's a 3-column chart, but it has a question for my students to consider and to discuss with their small groups. Again, I want my lesson to be focused on what my students know and their understanding, and then to respond accordingly, maybe provide some further discussion time, and to really have students work together to build their understanding of the topic, digital citizenship. So when I start this activity, we are going to get set up in a small group space. And what this is going to allow students to do is work in these small groups. I see I have a couple more people here joining on in, so I'm going to pop the directions into the chat to get connected to my live session if you would like to join the session before I assign those small groups. you'll see that as we have students connect through hellosmart.com, when you are ready to launch a small group workspace, it's going to pull your names randomly into small groups. So I'll show you what that looks like now. Let me go ahead and just get this set up. All right, so I can choose how many teams. So maybe I'll just put us into 2 teams right now for the purpose of this activity. Great. I can also randomly kind of move students around. So randomly assign you a team, but maybe I want to move Danny over here to team 2. Grace, I'm going to move you to team 1. So I can move students around. Maybe we physically go and sit together in those small groups, or maybe I have students move those names around to make some intentional small groups. So I'm going to go ahead and start this workspace. And once you hop into your group workspace, you're going to have the space here to add to the space. Why is it important to practice being safe online? Now, as soon as students start adding some information to this page, this will populate in real time. So I can see how students are, understanding this topic. So let me see here. I'm going to hop on over to team 2. We'll see if team 2 is adding some information. Let's see here. So why is it important to stay safe online? So maybe something like safety. Safety is important when you're working online. And now my group, we can start brainstorming on why it's important to stay safe, or maybe some ways to stay safe while learning or using the internet. So let's see here. Let's see how team 1 is doing. Okay, great. So we're starting to add some ideas. As a teacher, I can pop in text. I can put in, let's see here. How do we stay safe online? So I can add questions, maybe some more thinking questions. A lot of teachers, they like to maybe pick one color, and that way students know when they've added some things to the page, they always know that's the teacher that's added that information. I can see I can see which students are adding to this document. So if I click, I can see, okay, great. Thank you for your idea. And we can then keep students accountable as we're working. The other thing that I would want to emphasize is providing those opportunities for students to connect to this topic. Students that might have a variety of learning abilities, or maybe students who are multilingual. So we do have immersive reader built in as well. So as you're adding ideas to this page, I can click on the immersive reader icon, and then I can click and I can pop out to immersive reader as a student or as a teacher. We'll be able to use the picture dictionary, and then I can also in the book here find translations. So this is giving students additional ways to connect to the topic and to work collaboratively together in this digital space. All right, so let's see, we have a question popping in. Oh, Sarah, great question. So the question coming in is, can the teacher have those 3 headings at the top filled out for students, or do the students have to do that? So the way I structured this activity, I left it open-ended for students to add their 3 headings. However, I very well could have, as a teacher, set up the page with the headings, added the text. So I'll show you how to do that. I also could have given students some text to sort on the page, just depending on my students' ability levels. Maybe for younger students, I would give them some text to sort on the page versus having them add the text and images. So you can fully customize this activity, Sarah, to what's going to fit your students' needs. All right, great. So thanks everyone for those ideas. The next example that I'll pop in here, I would give each student the opportunity to create a comic strip to show how they're going to practice digital citizenship or how they're going to stay safe online. This comic strip template is one you can just save from the Lumio library. I'll show you where to save that then. But I would ask students to use some of these icons. Maybe they're going to grab one of the speech bubbles here and create a comic to demonstrate what they understand about the topic. So each student is getting their own, we go. Each student is getting their own copy because I've set this as an individual handout. So as students are working through and creating their comic, I see their names just pop right on up here. I could then show this in the classroom and I could have each student discuss their comic and show us what they've created. I also have my teacher handout copy that I can pop up on the smartboard as well. Or I could have students working through this maybe in a station, or maybe they're working independently on this activity. Or maybe students are working together in a small group. Again, I set this as an individual handout so you each could make your own. But we also could have created this as a small group workspace like we did in the last activity. Or we could have this set as a whole group space where we all create a comic together and then collaborate as a whole class. All right, so we'll just take a peek here and see how the group is doing. Great, awesome. We're starting a quick comic here. Someone asking, can I have your password? So I would be interested. How is the next person going to respond? Showing us how they're practicing online safety. All right, great. So thanks everyone. Right, maybe saying, oh, that's mean, or something, responding to what people are saying online. All right, great. Thanks everyone. Starting to create your comics to show how you might practice digital citizenship or what this might look like to practice online safety. All right, great. Well, any other questions about how you might use these activities with students? Feel free to hop into the chat and ask those there. Otherwise, we will start to look at one final quick activity, and then we'll look at the teacher view. So after I have students add and create their comic, again, I would publicly display this in the classroom so that students could explain their comic and what they created by furthering this conversation. Then I'm going to roll this into just a quick exit ticket. So I would start this shout it out activity where I would ask students to reflect on 3 facts, 2 questions, and 1 big idea from this topic of digital citizenship and what we created today in our learning. So shout it out is going to give us that opportunity. You're going to see on your screen, you're going to have that text box where you can choose a category, contribute facts, questions, and a big idea. Your information will start to show up on my screen. So I'm sharing my screen here in Zoom, but in the classroom, I would have this displayed on our smartboard. Or another public display in the classroom so that we can see what are some of those reflections that students have following our lesson. And then again, I'm going to use this information. It's all saving as I go through the lesson, and I'm going to use this information to then inform tomorrow's lesson. So we have many different ready-made exit tickets that you can use with your students, and we'll show you how to easily add those to your lesson. All right. So thanks everyone for participating in that example activity. What I'm going to ask you to do next is if you would like to sign in as a teacher to Lumio, we'll walk through those steps. In the upper left-hand corner, you do have the 3 little lines where you can click to leave my class so that you can leave that student perspective. And then you can close out that tab altogether. All right, great. We have some reflections here on our exit tickets. You can see students' responses pop in. Awesome. And once you click on those 3 little lines to leave my class, then we are actually going to head on over to a new tab and open up Google Drive. So I'll demonstrate those steps here on my screen. The other thing as a teacher, I do have the little Manage People icon where I could edit my class and remove my students from this class. All right, great. So I can dismiss my students from the class. And then, like I said, we are going to sign in as teachers. So I'm going to end this lesson. You can see on my shared screen, I am starting in my Google Drive. So in order to find Lumio, you simply need to open up a tab and go to your Google Drive. Once you're in Google Drive, I will show you then where to find Lumio. All right, so once you have your Google Drive open, up in the upper right-hand corner, you do have your waffle or your app switcher, and if you scroll down, you should find Lumio right in there. So I'm going to click on my waffle. I'm going to click on Lumio. And then once you click on Lumio, be sure to click on Teacher Sign In. Once you've clicked on Teacher Sign In, it will take you to your Lumio homepage, which will look similar to my shared screen here in Zoom. So you are welcome to go ahead and sign into your Lumio account as a teacher. Once you've gone through these steps to sign in as a teacher, you are welcome to hop into the chat and let me know that you've signed in or that you're ready to go. And that way I know we're ready for the next step. So we'll pause here for a moment. Just a couple of reminders about using Lumio with your Google Drive. Your lessons will be saving as you go. So you can see here in my Google Drive, I have today's Lumio file saved. When you head through to Lumio through that waffle, your lesson will save in a folder called Lumio. So you can easily find in your Google Drive, you can find your Lumio lessons. All right, great. I have some people that have been able to sign in to Lumio. So we'll just give it another moment if you'd like to sign in as a teacher to Lumio. And that way we can talk about creating some similar lessons to what we created today. I'll kind of take you a little bit step by step here. All right, great. Just a few reminders. Once you have signed into Lumio as a teacher, you will see your teacher display name. You will also see your class ID. So your ID is attached to your email address. So it is the same for your students when they join your lesson. If I go over to my edit class button, there's just a few things that I like to point out. If you needed to rename your class, you can do that here. You can also reset your class ID. You don't necessarily need to do that, but that's where you would find that option. Or edit your class banner. The other thing I find here is manage guest access. So I would want my students to sign in using Google and their school account. So I keep my guest access on when I work with teachers, but if I'm working with students, I'm going to toggle that off so students sign in using Google and their school account. When they sign in, the work that they complete or they add to those shared collaborative spaces, that work is going to save for them to come back to easily day after day. So this does not need to be a one-time lesson that we don't come back to, but it's that single sign-on for students so they can come back working over multiple class periods. So again, in that edit class, one more thing I want to find there is manage immersive reader. If you saw that we were using immersive reader today, you may want to go in and toggle that on for your students, again, to provide the reading and language supports for your students. All right. So a few more things here. The other part of Lumio that I always like to highlight is up at the top. You have my library, but then you also have the Lumio library. So in the Lumio library, you're going to find a collection of ready-made activities. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Lumio library. And what you're going to notice, you'll have some featured lessons up at the top. They're, more timely, events that are going on. But you may also be looking for an emotional literacy activity. So maybe something like an SEL check-in that you want to add to your lesson to easily use as something like an exit ticket or a daily check-in. If I scroll down, we do have some manipulatives, STEAM lessons, fractions, reading and writing. I really do like to come all the way kind of towards the bottom here, and I like to come into the graphic organizers. You'll see there's a collection of graphic organizers that you can add to your Lumio lessons. I really do like to highlight these because they're a great opportunity to create some of those student-led collaborative learning activities. So things like maybe a brain dump where we're all brainstorming together on a page, that can be a great one to save. If you are a science teacher, up at the top here, we have some featured science graphic organizers, but there's also ones like T-charts or character traits. Problem solution, maybe a 3-2-1 organizer. So just create some just helpful templates to have on hand. So feel free, if you find something, go ahead and click save to my library so that you can have it saved to your Lumio library and import into any lesson. Today's example, I focused on digital citizenship. So I'm just going to do a quick search at the top here. And I am going to go ahead and save this lesson to my library because I want to use some of the example activities. And then I'll show you how to customize this activity because especially going back to one of the questions that we have, can I provide some more information on the page for students? So you can really customize how this activity looks for your students or what you add to the page. So I'll save this to my library, then we'll get into a little bit more of the customization piece. You can also sort for grade levels, content areas, all of those different helpful filters there. So as you're looking for different activities, you may want to hop into the Lumio library to find some templates or activities that support your lessons. I'm going to head back to my library. So I'm going to go back to my Lumio library. And the other thing that I'm probably going to do is think about using a lesson that I already have. So if you have lessons saved in your Google Drive, maybe you have some PDFs or you have Google Slides that you've already used with your students, you can bring those into Lumio and then create those collaborative learning opportunities just by using what you already have. So I'm certainly a big fan of using those resources that we have. We're not here to totally create everything new, but how would you bring in some of those existing lessons? So the way I'm going to do that is go to the word import, and here are your choices. You can pull in something you might have saved to a computer or a device like a PDF. You can pull in what you have saved to your Google Drive. So maybe that's Google Slides or Google Docs. Maybe you created something in Google Draw and you're going to pull that in. My library, that's importing a resource you've saved to your Lumio library. So this morning, I just went in and I saved this digital learning day lesson, and I want to import that into my new lesson. So because I want to import, I'm going to go ahead and click My Library. But again, if you're clicking along with me and you have something you want to pull in from your Google Drive, feel free, click on Google Drive and you can bring in a file that you already have. But like I said, I'm going to go to My Library. I'm going to find this lesson that I just recently saved, and I'm going to click Select. Now, no matter what file I'm pulling in from either Google Drive or from my library, I can choose what pages I add. So I don't have to add every page in this lesson. Maybe I don't need every page today. I do want to pull in the game, and then I'm going to pull in this handout, and then, or this, why is it important to practice being safe? So I'm going to go ahead and click Add. I'll do a little bit more, editing and customizing of this lesson after I pull it in. I'm going to add a few more things, and that way I know I'm creating the lesson that is going to fit today's objective. All right, you can see that was giving me the message too. It's saving in my Google Drive. It's also saving in my Lumio library, so I can easily come back to this lesson. All right, so let's get into it. The next thing I want to add to my lesson is that whole class whiteboard. We did some brainstorming about digital citizenship. So I'm going to come down to the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to click on the plus sign in the bottom left-hand corner. Now, these are all the different pages that I can add. Again, I can import something else. So if I wanted to mix and match resources, bring in Google Slides, add a PowerPoint, add a PDF, I easily could do that. You can also add something like an ad-free YouTube video. You can add a Desmos graphing calculator, or maybe you want to add a science or math simulation. What I'm going to do is go ahead and click on New Page because I wanted that page that we can brainstorm on. So I'm going to click New Page. There are lots of different page templates in here. Maybe if you need something like lined paper. So I would encourage you to kind of click through here and find something that fits with maybe a theme or fits your topic of your lesson. What I needed for my lesson was just a blank page because I wanted that space for us to brainstorm. So I'm just going to add a new blank page. All right, now on this page, I am going to go ahead and click on the little shape icon at the top. And I am going to add a shape here to kind of create this visual here in the middle. And if I don't want students to move this around, I'm going to go ahead and click on the little drop down, and I am going to click lock. So now I'm going to lock that shape to the page. Now, thinking back on, can I provide those labels and whatnot for students? Yes, but before I turn this into an interactive page, I'm going to lock it down. So I'm going to go back to that little gallery icon. This time I'm going to add an image. So maybe I'm going to find an image of a Chromebook to add. Okay, great. I'm just doing a quick online search, but I could pull in images that I have. Again, I'm going to click on the drop down and lock this down so that students aren't able to move that around. And finally, I'm going to add a text box. Okay, digital citizenship. Great. Maybe I'm going to make that a little larger and move this onto the page. And I'll go ahead and lock that down. So there we go. Now I very easily have this page that I want my students to brainstorm on. I'm going to go up to the upper right-hand corner. And now what I'm going to do is click on the magic wand on the top. This magic wand is going to allow me to choose how the students interact with the page. I wanted this page to be interactive for the whole group. So I'm going to click on whole class whiteboard, and now all of my students can add to the page. All right, I want this to be my first one. Then I have my game. So this was the sorting game. If I click on the blue plus sign at the bottom, I could add another game-based activity. So if I click in here, I have the choice of 12 different games that I could build. We're using the sorting game as our example, but I also could come into the match 'em up activity, and maybe I want to create a matching game. If I want to create my own sorting game, I'm going to click here. I can add text, or I can click on the little image icon and add images as well, again, to create maybe visuals for my students to then sort. All right, I see a great question coming into the chat. Can I link a Lumio activity to Google Classroom? Yes, you can. So before we leave today, I'll add one or two more things to my lesson. I'll show you how to add it to Google Classroom. All right, I'm going to come into this page, and this was the one where students were going to collaborate on why it's important to practice safe online behavior. I wanted this to be collaborative, so I'm going to click edit. And again, if I wanted to add that text for students, maybe safety, just duplicate this, maybe privacy. All right, so I can add those headers for students, just like that question that came in. Let me spell that correctly. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and lock those down again so that students are not able to move these around. And the other thing you can add to your pages are equations. So if you need anything like math or science equations, you can add those. Again, I'm going to go up to my magic wand, and I'm going to turn this into a group workspace. So now students can work together in those small collaborative groups. I'm going to add another quick page here. So I'm going to go down to the plus sign in the bottom left-hand corner. And from the Lumio library, I want to save the comic strip template. Let's see if I can find that. Oh, great. Here we go. The comic strip template. So as I'm adding pages, I can do a quick search of the Lumio library. So I'm going to grab my comic strip template. Awesome. And I can save this to my lesson. Now, I might not need all of those pages. So once I bring this in, maybe I want to delete some of the pages that I have, or maybe previously I've saved this template to my Lumio library. So I'm going to go ahead. I want to keep this one, and I'm going to delete this. There we go. Now I have my comic strip template. And this one, I wanted this, if I go to my magic wand, I wanted each student to have their own copy. But again, I could have put us into small groups or a whole class whiteboard. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this into an individual activity. All right, so now I have our whole class brainstorming. We have our game, we have our small group workspace, and then I have the comic strip template for students to work on. Finally, I want to add an exit ticket to my lesson. So I'm going to go to this plus sign in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to come to the bottom where I have questioning and reflection templates. So I'm going to click here. And I used to shout it out as a way for my students to, reflect on what they learned, but I could easily scroll down and find maybe an individual handout. I will let you know that my intention is to share out this lesson through Google Classroom. I'm going to do that with just a quick student share link. Like I said, I'll make sure that we take a peek at that before we're done today. The individual handouts work really well if I want students to access the lesson independently through Google Classroom. So maybe that's with some independent working stations or small group stations, or maybe this is a homework assignment. Individual handouts are really going to work the best for that independent learning. For a lesson that I have students interacting with, and I've also have this pulled up on maybe the smartboard and an interactive display, something like shout it out or response is going to work well for that teaching scenario. Response was that activity that we started with in the beginning of our time together today. So maybe I'm going to add one that's an agree or disagree, or how do you feel about the topic? But just for our purposes right now, I used the shout it out activity. So I'm going to go ahead and click 3, 2, 1, and now I have this added to my lesson. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I rename my lesson here. All right. Great. So now I have my lesson all put together. And now what I'm going to do is click finish editing. All right. So now let's talk about how do your students connect to the lesson, and then how do I share this out through Google Classroom? So now that I have my lesson created, I can click start. I come up to the top where the little person with a number is, and I can pop out. There's a little arrow right here that's going to pop out the directions for my students to connect. This is that live connection where students go to hellosmart.com. They can sign in easily just using Google in their school account and then use your class ID. So some teachers do put the hellosmart.com link in Google Classroom for students to access easily, so they know where to find that link. Or you could create a bookmark for students to easily come into. And your class ID stays the same. So it will save for students so they can easily come back to your class and engage in activities. We know, it's a routine as we're connecting to new things, so that can help you with that routine. But let me go ahead and come back to my home screen here, or my Lumio homepage. And what I want to do is share out this lesson for students to continue working on outside of class, or maybe they're going to work on this activity with, a kind of more self-paced. So I'm going to click on the 3 little dots on this lesson, and I'm going to go to where it says share link. So once I click on share link, I do get 2 choices. The teacher share link, that's the link I'm going to share with a colleague so that a fellow teacher can save their own copy of this lesson that I created. Or I'm going to grab the student share link. This is what I copy, and then I go in Google Classroom, I create an assignment, and I paste this link in my assignment. So students will click on the link. They do sign in using Google, but if they're already signed into their Chromebook or signed into Google Classroom, it's going to just allow them to click their name and come on in. So it's a very easy single sign-on for students. But I would copy this in that Google Classroom assignment for students to click and access and continue working on outside of class, or to access for an activity that I intended to be outside of class. Or again, if I'm thinking about building some stations or some choice activities for students, this could be one of the choices that I provide for them. So again, I click on this link and paste that into Google Classroom for them. All right, the final thing that I usually think about doing with my lessons is creating a copy of my lesson if I need to use it with more than one group, or if I'm using the lesson with more than one class, maybe you have different sections. So what I'm going to do is click on the three little dots here, and I'm going to make a copy of my lesson. So I like to make a copy and then name one copy, my template copy. And then if I have multiple sections, I'm just going to make a quick copy of my lesson, name it period 3, and then I have a copy of the lesson for that group. Because as you'll see, all the work that you do in the lesson saves in that copy of the lesson, so that if I have students working on an activity, and again, I want this to be something we come and work on over multiple days, I want to be able to come back into the copy with my students' work. So let me go back into the lesson that we worked on earlier so you can see what this looks like. If I come into this lesson, I can start it. This was the one that we worked on. I can come in, I can review the whole class whiteboard. So maybe I'm viewing how, students work here out after class. I can see how we completed the sorting activity. I can also review the small group workspaces. So all of that work that you were doing earlier today, it saves in the lesson, and I can easily review it to then check students' understanding and then continue on with our lesson for the next day. All right, so let me know, please, if there's any other questions that you have about this kind of quick walkthrough on how you might create some collaborative learning for students using Lumio. In just a moment, I will pop in the chat some resources for you to access outside of our session today, but you are welcome to let me know if you have any final questions here that I can answer as we're kind of rounding out our time. The other thing I would be interested in, if you would like to hop into the chat and share, but what's one new idea from today's session? So what's something you saw or experienced or were able to build that is a new idea that you are interested in applying to your instruction or to use with your students? So if you wouldn't mind hopping into the chat and sharing with us what is one new idea from today's session. Yeah, the comic strip activity, I agree that kind of a different idea for students to be able to create those visuals. Yeah. Oh, yes. Being able to use some things in Lumio Library in your PE classroom. Yep. They're adding some different topics and whatnot. There's some graphic organizers, those sports fields that you can save to your Lumio library to use in all different settings. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Feel free to keep adding some ideas.